Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest is Brian Ellison. Brian is the current Libertarian candidate for the 8th Congressional District, U.S. Congress.
That's correct, yeah.
Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So tell the viewers a little bit about your background.
So I grew up in the city of Royal Oak, born and raised. After I graduated high school, I joined the military. I spent just over 8 years altogether, time in military service. I was 4 years active. After I completed my initial obligation, I did a tour in the National Guard. I was in Texas for a while and then Arizona National Guard. And it was while I was in the Arizona National Guard that I was reactivated. And I went over to Iraq. I was in Iraq from March of 2003 through the end of March 2004. And then I got out of the military April 2005. Wait, I think I screwed those dates up. So I think it was maybe 04 to 05. I was activated in late 03. So it was 04 to 05. I got out in 05. Came back, we had lived in Colorado Springs for a short while, then we came back here to Michigan with my family. I have 3 kids. We've been married almost 19 years now, and I've been working in construction basically since we moved back here in 2005.
Okay. Why did you decide to run for Congress?
Well, really, you know, I've always had kind of an ambition to run a political campaign in general. And not so much because I want to be a politician, so much as I want to, you know, as a libertarian, my belief is that we need to shrink the government. And at this point, with where the Libertarian Party is, the focus really is on really kind of educating voters. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to run a campaign where I could get a message out, where I could talk to people like you, talk to your viewers, and talk about the concepts of liberty and freedom, and expose some of the facts that while we feel like we're free sometimes, when we really start looking at some of the details in the society and the way it's structured, that we really have lost a lot of the freedoms that some of us even still take for granted.
Okay. How many opponents do you have? You have the Republican and the Democrat.
Correct.
And then is there any others?
Frankly, I don't even know if there's another third-party candidate. We were on the primary this year, which is new for the Libertarian Party, and so we focused a lot of our efforts in the primary there. I know most third parties nominate at a convention, just after the primaries. For the major parties, and so there may have been another. I don't know if there was another independent that got on the ballot. I want to say there's one other candidate, but frankly, we're looking at the top runners, and they're the ones that we're shooting for.
Okay. So I think the Democrat opponent is it Ellison Slotkin?
That's correct.
Now, she worked for the CIA.
Yeah, she's a deep state operative. I mean, it's the interesting thing about this race in particular, and the reason why we chose it, because I don't live in the 8th district. I live in the 9th district, which is basically a secure, Democrat seat. It has been for years, going from Sandy Levin. Now it looks like it's going to go to his son, right? That's how politics work. So, but we looked at the 8th district, which is historically pretty Republican. But Mike Bishop, as a career politician, he's a weak Republican. He's like a big government Republican. A rhino, I guess, is what many Republicans might call him. But again, we have a career politician, and then in Ellison Slotkin, you have, how else to describe her but a deep state operative. She was an agent for the CIA. She was in the Defense Department, deputy director of something. And so what you have is this Republican in Mike Bishop who is, not your typical Republican, and you have a Democrat who's not your typical Democrat. And so what you have is 2 candidates who are essentially the same. You've got a career politician and somebody who's a career government insider. And that's where, I as a candidate offer the voters a significant difference between those two choices.
Okay. Let's go back. You mentioned you don't live in the district, and I want our viewers to know that's kind of something unique about, congressional candidates. You don't have to live in the district to run for the district.
Right, and that's and as far as I know, that's the only seat. Obviously, if you run in any state races, you have to live in the district that you're running in. But yeah, for U.S. Congress, you can run in any district. And so what you see is a lot of political jockeying, and you see people looking at where they think they can be most competitive. And that's certainly what we did. On the Libertarian ticket, we only have 2 candidates for Congress this year. One in the oh man, what district is that? The 11th district, I believe, is where Leonard Schwartz is running, and then we're running in the 8th district. And so we figure that if we're going to put effort forth to run a campaign in a district, there's no point in running in a district just because it's close to home. We want to run in a district, again, where we feel like we can make an impact. And so that's what we found in the 8th district.
Okay. Now, several months ago, you started a campaign to give shotguns to the homeless.
I did.
Okay. What was that all about?
So there was obviously a lot of layers to this. Like if you think of like an onion, right? This was one of my projects that was definitely an onion. And on the surface, what we were talking about is just the fact that we have homeless people who are more commonly victims of crime than the general population. They have no way of defending themselves. The small amount of personal property that they have is obviously very valuable to them, and so we just felt like they should be able to protect that. Kind of the caveat to that, and the reason why we decided to focus on this is because as a homeless person, their rights to own weapons are severely restricted by state regulation. So we all tout the Second Amendment and everybody has a right to bear arms. And however, their rights have functionally been eliminated by the fact that they don't have a permanent address. So they can't have a pistol because they can't register it. They can't purchase a firearm because they don't have an ID that shows that they have a permanent address. And so we wanted to kind of highlight this systematic way that a group their rights can be completely eliminated just out of pure circumstance. And I think that we were successful in bringing that to light, and also just bringing out kind of the plight of the homeless. I mean, we had so much response was like, well, why shotguns? Why not feed them? Why not give them clothes? And my response was, why don't you give them clothes? You set up a charity, I'll donate to it. And it was all in a spirit of a voluntary charity. This wasn't ever intended to be a proposed government program. I despise government programs in general. So, it was just a way to get kind of a unique message out in a unique way. And we were successful in the fact that we actually did get one shotgun out to one homeless man. And so, I feel like he's probably in a better place now than he was before we met him.
Okay. Do you think, a lot of this, I guess maybe the stereotype, people have the image of a homeless person, maybe on drugs. Do you think that was a safe thing to do to give a homeless person a gun?
Well, I think that if we don't talk about the dangers of the other people that have guns, I think we're being hypocritical. So if we look at something like police officers who have, statistically are substance abusers. I mean, they're alcoholics. They use different drugs, steroids, probably a lot of them, and they're very heavily armed. They're also, more statistically likely to be domestic abusers. And so these are violent people that are armed by profession and are 32 times more likely to kill somebody than your average person, and nobody's talking about disarming the police. So I think that when we look at it comparatively, the idea of a homeless person having a shotgun is significantly less dangerous than having a police officer with a pistol. Okay.
I want to get to the police in a moment, but just you said your campaign for shotguns for the homeless was successful. Was it successful just because you got that one gentleman a shotgun, or by raising awareness, or
But
how do you
it was,
find
yeah,
it?
really kind of by both metrics. I think it was successful in the fact that we were able to arm somebody. It was successful in the fact that as any voluntary initiative, it had as much power as the donors were willing to give it, right? So we were able to put it out there, got widespread attention. We didn't get a significant amount of donations, right? So by that, we're able to determine, okay, this is not something that the people value. And so we learned that, and we were also able to raise awareness. So I think that I think there's many ways you can measure success in that program.
Okay. I gotta be honest, was this more of a publicity stunt for you? Because I'm sure you got a lot of press out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not being shy about it at all. We were certainly trying to reach out and get some attention. Being a third-party candidate, we have very few resources. There's no corporate special interests that are lining up to give us money. There's no media out there that is going out of their way to give us any attention, and in fact, the media in many ways goes out of their way to ignore us. And so we had to come out with a message that would get people to say, wait, what? What did that guy just say? And so I think, again, from that aspect, it was successful. We did get a lot of press coverage. We got, international media coverage, and a lot of it was actually fair coverage too, because the leading headlines were like, "This guy's nuts," right? That's how the headline goes out. But when you read the articles, and we got to talk about the fundamental principles of the erosion of rights of a group of people, and the other thing of the way that people are able to put homeless people, and kind of you alluded to it. Well, they have substance abuse problems or mental disorders, and where it's okay to group homeless people in this group and treat them differently than everybody else. And if we look back historically, back in the 1950s, it was still okay to do that with black people. And so I think that, again, just kind of raising that awareness to say, hey, these people are people too. And you can't just say, just because they're homeless, that makes them, a drug-addicted, dangerous felon who, has mental problems. It's just simply not the case. They're just people.
Okay. Now, I want our viewers to know, I did reach out to the Royal Oak Police Department to see if they would have somebody here to have a discussion with you about what we're going to talk about next. And that is, you were protesting. There were 2 fatal shootings of civilians in Royal Oak.
Correct, yeah.
And so you were protesting that. And why don't you tell the viewers what took place?
So just a little bit to expand on the background a little bit. April 10th of this year, Nino Gordon was shot and killed in a White Castle drive-thru in Royal Oak. So I live in Madison Heights. My kids go to school in Royal Oak. I worked in Royal Oak. We coached softball in Royal Oak. My kids played sports. My mom lives in Royal Oak. My dad lives in Royal Oak. So I have very close ties to this community. So April 10th.
Your dad was mayor at one point, was he?
He was, yeah.
Okay.
And so that happened on April 10th, and it got very little press attention. I mean, obviously it was covered, but it kind of just was there and then it was gone. Well, 35 days later, on March 14th, Cody Reynolds, 20-year-old kid, was shot and killed by Royal Oak police. So we have 2 fatal shootings of unarmed young men in the city of Royal Oak in a span of 35 days. And when the second one happened, that's kind of when the red flag went up for me, and I said, what's going on? There's more to this. This is not just a coincidence. You can't just have, there's no killings for so many years, and then there's 2 just over a month apart. And so I really started looking into the details. I started requesting documents from the city, submitting FOIA requests. We're essentially stonewalled. We got no information back whatsoever. And so I started speaking out publicly. I spoke at commission meetings. I spoke at the Memorial Day Parade. And we set up a protest event at a police fundraiser. So the police were having a fundraiser, a 5K event. And there was another, like a half-mile event run with the chief. And so we set up a protest. We had probably about 12 or 15 people that showed up, and we were just there with our signs. I had my megaphone. I didn't have any planned statements. I didn't have anything that I planned on saying. Really, we just had our signs, and we wanted to raise awareness to the community. And from from the perspective of there's people here with their young children that, you know, Cody Reynolds, as a 20-year-old man, 10 years ago, he could have been one of those kids, and maybe he was running in that in a 5K or the Oak Apple run at the time or whatever it was. And a lot of the people in the community just seem to think that these are anomalies and it can't happen to them, and they don't realize how real it is until it actually reaches out and touches them. And so we were just trying to raise awareness. So it was at that event that I was essentially cornered. I mean, I was basically corralled by several police officers who were shadowing me the whole time we were there. And I tried to cross the street to avoid them. They continued to follow me, and then I got on my bullhorn and I just said, "Stop approaching me, I'm unarmed, stop approaching me." Repeated that a few times as I backed onto the curb, and they decided that they could arrest me at that point.
Okay. Now, was it because you stepped into the street and they told you not to?
It depends. Because the charges that they filed were obstructing government operations, which is a really odd charge, and then resisting arrest, because I did resist arrest because it was an unlawful arrest. But last week they changed the charges. So I had a hearing for a motion to dismiss those charges, and 2 days before the hearing they changed all the charges. So the new charges I'm facing now are attempted obstructing government operations and interfering with a police officer. So don't know how that's going to play out at this point, but it seems 3 months later they don't even know what they had arrested me for, yet somehow they believe like they had probable cause to arrest me. So it was really an odd situation.
Okay. Now, didn't they seize your gun at one point?
Yeah, so there was actually a second arrest. So in August, so this was just a few weeks ago, I was on, they were doing a groundbreaking ceremony for the new police station. And so we printed up some small signs, some 11 by 17 signs with a little stick on it, and we were planning on just walking around, a small group of us walking around this event, and they had like questions on them, like things that would provoke people to maybe say, "Hey, what's that all about?" And we had just hoped that people would engage with us and we'd be able to discuss some of the what's going on in the city of Royal Oak with the corruption in the police force, the lack of transparency, and some of the other criminal behavior. And as soon as we got to the event, we were approached by police officers and they said, "This is your protest area. We roped it off for you." And you know, there was a lengthy discussion, but ultimately I said, "I reject your protest area. You know, I have the right to free speech, and if anybody else can walk around in this venue, I can walk around in the venue as well," it was just a parking lot. And so I was there at the event for a couple hours, walking around. They told me if I carried my sign into the event, I'd be arrested. So I just walked around for a while. I talked to a couple people. I did go into the protest area and I attempted to protest, and they said, no, you can't protest. You can't, as I vocalized, I shouted out that the police chief was a liar. And they said, "No, you can't make any noise." You told me this is the place to exercise my First Amendment right. Now you're telling me I can't exercise my First Amendment right here. So very late in the event, I grabbed one of my signs and I said, you know, obviously nobody's been disturbed by me being here. So there's no way they can charge me with disorderly conduct if I don't disturb anybody. And so I just took my sign and I walked out of their you know, the area that they had blocked off. Got about 10 steps before I was approached and assaulted, confronted by the police officers, and eventually arrested because I refused to go back behind the line. So after that second arrest, the prosecutor filed an emergency motion to amend my bond conditions. They put forth a motion to prohibit me from being within 50 feet of any uniformed law enforcement officer or anybody acting on my behalf. And this is, I mean, I don't know if it's unprecedented, but I don't know of anybody else that's had this, a functional restraining order for every police officer everywhere. So this isn't like Royal Oak specific. This is any police officer anywhere or anybody acting on my behalf. So really, it's almost like, you know, a merit badge. I feel like you know, the police are so scared of what I'm saying, because I haven't threatened them in any way. They're so scared of what I have to say that they're really trying to muzzle me. So after that, and then after the additional charge of disorderly conduct, I got a letter from the clerk, Oakland County clerk, that my concealed pistol license was revoked. So I had to surrender my CPL based on the charges, and And when I was arrested as well, I was armed when I was arrested, and they confiscated my pistol, and to this day they still have it. I've called them probably about every other day at this point, asking on the status of what's taking so long and when I can get it back. And just like every other question I've asked the Royal Oak Police Department, I've gotten no straight answers and just basically been stonewalled.
Okay. Now, that restraining order, you've had that amended, haven't you?
Yeah, so when we went to court, the original one was heard, like the first week of September. I had a court date last week, and the judge, when he put the bond conditions into effect, he said that at every hearing that we would review them and revise them if needed. And so we had a hearing on the 13th, and the judge determined, based after oral arguments, the judge determined that they would give me back all of the bond money that I had put forth. And so I had paid $500 cash bond for both arrests. So they did refund the $1,000, which was great, because being unemployed, it's nice to have a couple dollars here and there, helps buy the groceries. But aside from that, they said, I said, they basically kept everything in force, but I said, well, I got a call from a detective at the Oakland County Sheriff that wants to talk to me about an assault case, but I can't go talk to him. And the judge said, okay, well, we'll change that. You can, we'll write something in there so if it's regarding a pending investigation, you can meet with them. And I said, okay. And also, if I have to go to the court in circuit court at Oakland County, I can't go in because there's sheriff's deputies guarding the court. And so he said, okay, well, we'll deal with that. So they revised the motion, and now it says that if I'm approached by a law enforcement officer about an investigation, I can speak with them. And then it also says that if I have a court date scheduled, that I can interact with law enforcement. And so really interesting the way they wrote it, because the way they wrote it, they didn't say, if I have a court date, then I can have contact with law enforcement to facilitate that court date or to attend the court date. It just said, if I have a court date scheduled, I can interact with law enforcement. I have several court dates scheduled. So I'm still trying to determine how I'm going to interpret that order, but I think I'm in the clear to interpret it that I can have all the contact with law enforcement I want.
Okay, well, I'd be careful. I don't know. But, okay, anything else you want to say about your interactions with the Royal Oak Police?
Well, I think that I feel like we're winning. I feel like we're really reaching people. More people are paying attention now. Certainly after you can see a video on YouTube of me attending this event and just peacefully interacting with people, peacefully interacting with the officers and everything, and then just being arrested for virtually no reason. And I think that the fact that the city is acting out of such desperation and doing such strange things, I feel like we're really getting close to breaking something there. So I do have a lawsuit against them for their denying the FOIA requests. So that's going to be going through the circuit court. And I really think people should just be aware to just be very careful around the Royal Oak Police. There's good officers in the department. It's not, that's certainly not my case that all of the officers are bad officers, and we can put moral arguments aside. But the command structure itself they're very corrupt, and I've heard way too many stories about the criminal behavior that they engage in to doubt any of them.
Okay. Let's get back to your congressional race. What are one or two things that you think are the major issues facing America today?
Well, first and foremost, I guess the nearest and dearest to me is the military intervention that we engage in. As a veteran myself, and having been in Bosnia, been in Kosovo, been in Iraq, and seeing firsthand kind of the destruction and the harm that we cause to these other sovereign nations when we invade them, occupy them, just the chaos that ensues after our intervention. I would really like to see that end immediately. I think that if we maintain a standing army, which there's an argument about whether or not that's even constitutional, that it certainly should be for defensive purposes only. And so ending foreign military intervention is again, probably nearest and dearest to me. The second issue is a spending issue. And I think you hear a lot of, probably a lot of conservatives and a lot of libertarians talk about taxing. Like, we need to cut taxes, we need to cut taxes, we need to cut taxes. And spending is what we need to cut. We need to stop spending. When we stop spending, we can stop taxing. If we just stop taxing, and then, depending on what side of the aisle you fall on, they're going to decide what to take this money away from and what programs to take it away from. I think functionally we need to spend our time focusing on what programs should be dismantled and where the savings should come before we talk about reducing taxes. And so stopping spending, federal spending on the drug war is obviously a waste of money. That needs to stop immediately. The Federal Department of Education, it's just a bloated bureaucracy that doesn't serve any purpose. The states can handle all that responsibility. Cutting back on spending on defense obviously is a huge one. And so eliminating wasteful spending and getting back to something that is more, not something where we're just continuing to place the burden on the next generation. I have 3 kids myself. I expect to have grandchildren at some point in my life, and I don't want to be part of a generation that passes the buck on to the next generation.
Okay. Edward Snowden, do you consider him a hero or a traitor?
I consider him a hero. I think that information needs to be free, and when the government's engaging in behavior that is unconstitutional, that's all of the spying that the NSA was doing, that should be exposed. Absolutely should be exposed. Government has no business doing that stuff, and it's a shame that anybody would consider Edward Snowden to be a traitor when all he did was say, "Look at what your government is doing to you." And he put his life on the line for that. And I think that, hero is kind of a word I think that we throw around maybe a little bit too loosey-goosey sometimes, but he did the right thing. He stood on principle, and he risked a lot to do it. And so I admire the sacrifices that he made to do that. And I think that if more people were willing to make sacrifices like that, I think that we'd live in a freer society.
Talking about government spying, and this might be a stretch, but yesterday I was at a Bloomfield Hills open house, and they had the sheriff's helicopter there. They had a Dodge Challenger that was seized from a heroin dealer, and it said right on the rear quarter panel, this vehicle was seized from a heroin dealer. And it has the Oakland County Sheriff's decals and Mike Bouchard's name on there. So I took a couple pictures of that, posted on Facebook. This event was supposed to run from noon to 4. I posted these pictures around 1 o'clock. By 2:30, that car was no longer there in the event. I don't know, but maybe somebody's out there monitoring my Facebook pages.
I know for a fact that they're monitoring mine, and I think that anytime, and because they bring it up in court every time I go into court, they talk about Facebook posts. So, yeah, absolutely, no doubt. Anybody who is a voice of dissent is being monitored, and I don't think that's a stretch at all.
Okay, well, with that, I have to wrap it up, but I wish you luck in your congressional race and with your problems with the Royal Oak Police Department.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on, Paul. I appreciate it.